Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We still have some attendees rolling in, and so um, thank you again for joining us, and we'll get started here in a couple of minutes.
We'll wait about one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, it's been a couple minutes. I think we can get started now. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Employee and Supervisor Town Hall. We will be discussing the recent changes to the Fair Labor Standards Act, and we'll be taking a deep dive in what the changes mean to you. Our main goal is to assist you, the impacted employees and supervisors, in understanding and preparing for these changes. My name is Melanie Lopez, HR Manager for Compensation, and I will be co-leading this presentation for today. Emily, will you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Arzate. I'm a manager here in HR Client Services. Thank you so much for your participation in today's town hall. I will turn it over to Kevin so he can introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Kevin Stevenson. I'm Vice President for Human Resources, and just want to echo those comments of thanking you all for being here this morning.
Before we get started, we want to give you a warm welcome and provide you with some details on today's webinar structure so that you can get the most out of this session. I'm going to briefly go over some housekeeping items that you will need to be aware of. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A section on the webinar. Answers will be addressed throughout the presentation in the Q&A section, but because we have such a wide audience, please focus your questions on topics of general interest. If you have any specific inquiries, direct them to the FLSA@unm.edu email address. I do want to mention that we have a lot of information to share today, so you can submit your questions as we go, or you can hold on to see if we answer your questions in a later slide. Please know that we'll do our best to answer all questions, and any unanswered questions will be addressed via email or included in an FAQ and posted on the FLSA webpage. Also, a recording of this session will be available on the FLSA website. With that said, let's get started. So on today's agenda, we're going to discuss what is the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, UNM's approach, what it means to be non-exempt, preparing for overtime, payroll, timeline and next steps, and resources. So what is FLSA? I want to start by providing an overview of what the Fair Labor Standards Act is. It is a federal law administered by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it governs provisions related to exempt and non-exempt status and overtime pay, along with other areas related to employment. All employees are protected by this law, and depending on their salary and duties, are categorized as either 1, exempt, not eligible for overtime, or 2, non-exempt, eligible for overtime. Under FLSA federal guidelines, in determining if a job is exempt or non-exempt, the job must meet both the FLSA salary threshold and the duties test for exemption status. So specifically for the salary threshold, again, the position must meet the weekly salary threshold amount to be exempt, and this is regardless of full-time or part-time status. The FLSA salary threshold does not distinguish separate thresholds between part-time or full-time employees. For the duties test, the job must meet the duties test for an FLSA exemption under the executive, administrative, professional, or computer employee. So FLSA regulation changes. What is changing and why? Every now and then, the Department of Labor, DOL, will review and evaluate regulations and propose adjustments. The DOL recently did an evaluation and released a final rule increasing the FLSA threshold for overtime exemptions effective January 1st, 2025. The current threshold is $43,888 annually, which is $844 weekly, and this will be increased to $58,656 annually, which is $1,128 weekly. There are no changes to the duties test, only to the FLSA salary threshold. UNM must prepare and implement changes to remain in compliance with the federal mandate. But please note, the rule is currently subject to several legal challenges, and there is a possibility of court intervention prior to the January 1st implementation.
To maintain compliance with federal regulations, UNM is implementing the following changes, which include transitioning all grade 11 and 12 exempt positions to non-exempt on January 1st, 2025. All exempt staff in these grades will move to a non-exempt hourly status regardless of their weekly salary. This means that all grade 11 and 12 employees who are above the FLSA threshold will transition to non-exempt. Part-time exempt staff in grade 13 and above with weekly salaries below $1,128 will also transition to non-exempt. Employees who are already non-exempt will remain non-exempt. UNM's approach balances maintaining the need for compliance with minimizing mid-year operational and financial impacts to departments. The decision to move grade 11 and 12 to non-exempt status reflects a careful consideration of financial and operational factors in ensuring both compliance and consistency. The rationale for making this change is based on the following factors. The minimum salary of a grade 12 is significantly lower than the new salary threshold. There is already a high volume of non-exempt classifications that currently exist within these grades. Keeping grade 12 exempt would have had a significant financial impact on departments in order to remain exempt due to the number of employees below the threshold. Moving all jobs in grade 12 and below ensures those performing similar duties in the same classification are treated consistently from an overtime standpoint. Additionally, changing exemption status has a significant impact, and frequent status updates would have been difficult to manage. And salary and pay changes are fluid, and it would be challenging for departments to track and administer exemption status as individual salaries increase. Careful consideration was also given to maintaining grade 13s as exempt. The minimum salary for grade 13 closely aligns with the new threshold, providing a natural separation between grades. Maintaining exempt status for grade 13 minimizes financial impact as only a limited number of employees fall below the threshold. Additionally, most positions in this grade are already classified as exempt. UNM is focusing on salary grades rather than individual salaries to ensure that employees performing similar duties with the same classifications, such as grade 12 and below, are treated consistently regarding overtime eligibility. Frequent changes to exemption status can have significant impacts and are challenging to manage, especially as salary and pay adjustments are fluid and occur regularly. Administering exemption changes based on individual salary fluctuations would increasingly disrupt employees and pose challenges for departments to track and manage. UNM is currently preparing for the final FLSA rule to take effect as scheduled on January 1st, 2025. The Division of Human Resources is closely monitoring the ongoing legal challenges to the rule. Any updates will be communicated promptly. If the rule is delayed or blocked, UNM will pause on implementing the new salary threshold and proposed exemption changes. We will incorporate updates on the status of legal challenges on a regular basis as we learn more.
What it means to be exempt versus non-exempt. This chart details differences between exempt employees and non-exempt employees. Exempt employees may be in a work status beyond their regular scheduled hours without accumulating overtime or comp time. They may often work over 40 hours per work week and may be required to perform work outside of standard office hours without additional compensation. Divisions, work units, and supervisors determine expectations and guidelines for these employees. For non-exempt employees, hours an employee works beyond their regular scheduled shift may still be considered hours worked and need to be paid. Employees in a non-exempt status must be paid for all hours worked and cannot work off the clock. If a supervisor permits or becomes aware that an employee has worked over 40 hours in a week, the employee must be compensated for the overtime at 1.5 times their regular rate, which is time and a half, regardless of approval prior from their supervisor or work location. What will remain the same? An employee's professional status will remain the same. The employee will have the same supervisor, job titles, duties, and responsibilities. There will be no impact on employee benefits coverage. However, there will be a shift in how it is deducted from the paycheck. Understanding that situations are different, and we recommend speaking with your benefits specialist about your specific situation if you have questions. The value of employee work and the importance of employee contributions does not change and remains high. There still may be some flexibility with appropriate approvals within a given work week. Employees may have the option to flex their time.
As we prepare for this change, we aim to ensure open and transparent communication. On October 22nd, HR Level 3 agents received a detailed list of impacted employees. A follow-up special FLSA HR forum was held on October 24th for HR Level 3 agents and department HR liaisons to prepare for this change. A recording of that meeting is available on the FLSA website. On October 25th, HR Level 3 agents received a copy of the notice to be sent to impacted employees and their supervisors. And then on October 28th, those notifications were sent directly to impacted employees and their supervisors. And many of you who received that notification are here with us today. College, school, division, HR agents, and departmental HR liaisons are available to support and assist you through this transition by keeping employees and supervisors informed, helping employees to understand non-exempt status, sharing FLSA resources and timelines, communicating internal procedures, providing guidance on department timekeeping procedures and deadlines, and outlining the process and timing for requesting overtime or comp time. Your HR liaison or level 3 agent will be a valuable resource to you during this transition period. Please work with your supervisor if you are not sure who yours is. As employees and supervisors begin to prepare for change of transitioning from non-exempt to exempt, we would like to share a few helpful elements and things to consider. It is very important for employees, along with their supervisors, to track all work time closely. Employees should talk with their supervisors about standard work hours and tracking time in banner or logo time. As a non-exempt employee at UNM, this requires positive time entry, meaning that either time is tracked on a timesheet signed by a supervisor and submitted to a department timekeeper, or time is tracked and approved in logo time. Employees should discuss what the approval process is for accumulating and using overtime or comp time if more than 40 hours are worked in a week. Any reported hours worked above 40 will be paid in the form of overtime or compensatory time at a rate of time and a half. Additionally, there should be considerations given toward changes to standard work hours and the process to request these changes. Employees should also discuss the process for reporting absences or late arrivals and will need to monitor time for breaks and lunches. Supervisors are expected to adhere to all university policies and FLSA regulations by ensuring employees accurately record all hours worked. They are responsible for accurately reporting and compensating overtime or comp time for hours exceeding 40 per week and following division and unit time and leave reporting procedures. Supervisors' responsibilities include maintaining 100% compliance with timely time entry, tracking, and approvals. Any potential opportunities for overtime should be fair and consistent, and careful consideration should be given to the associated costs and budget impacts. We understand that this transition may have a big impact on business operations. Supervisors should consider the following strategies to support the transition and ensure work is completed effectively. Monitor and track hours. It is important to track time and ensure accurate records of employee hours and avoid unexpected overtime. This may help supervisors spot trends and predict when overtime might occur. Analyze workloads and adjust as necessary. Supervisors can identify trends in why overtime is occurring and address the root causes to minimize unnecessary overtime by reassigning, redistributing, or reprioritizing tasks if necessary. Assess the need to hire additional staff or use temporary workers. If overtime becomes a regular occurrence, considerations can be made to hiring more employees or bringing in temporary staff to ease the workload with the appropriate approvals. Communicate openly with employees and set clear overtime procedures. Supervisors should keep an open line of communication with employees about their workload and overtime needs and establish and communicate clear guidelines about when overtime is allowed and the approval process. Consideration of single incumbents. Optimizing scheduling. Plan ahead by organizing shifts and workloads effectively. Consider flexible scheduling to reduce the need for overtime. Consideration of single incumbents. When considering single incumbents, assess whether their workload is manageable within a 40-hour work week. Additionally, it can be helpful to cross-train employees in multiple tasks within their job scope so they can assist during peak times and reduce the need for overtime, while still encouraging them to work efficiently during regular hours. When monitoring non-exempt time worked, additional consideration should be given to practices that could result in incurring overtime. This includes meetings that extend beyond the standard workday, interrupted lunch periods, staff special luncheons, office retreats, the use of work laptops and cell phones that are taken home, and requirements to work on deliverables outside of regular hours. Additionally, travel time, including commuting, travel during the workday, one-day assignments, and overnight travel may look very different for non-exempt employees. Please review UAP 3300 paid time for more details related to travel time for non-exempt employees. We understand that transitioning to non-exempt status is a significant shift for employees, bringing several impactful changes, including transitioning from being paid monthly to being paid bi-weekly, the requirement to begin tracking hours worked and leave taken, becoming eligible for overtime or compensatory time with prior supervisor approval for any hours worked and reported over 40 in a work week, adapting to new monitoring requirements for work schedules, including breaks and lunch periods, adjusting expectations around work outside of regular hours, such as checking emails or returning calls, which now requires tracking time. With all of these impactful changes to prepare for the transition, employees can take the following steps to help prepare for this transition. Review the FLSA website for resources designed for both employees and supervisors. Gain a clear understanding of what it means to be non-exempt and become familiar with university administrative policies related to non-exempt employees. Have a one-on-one discussion with supervisors to review department-specific processes and expectations, and discuss work schedules, deadlines, timekeeping procedures, and the use of comp and flex time. As we discussed, impacted employees will be transitioning to a bi-weekly cycle. Under a bi-weekly pay schedule, employees will receive paychecks every 2 weeks instead of monthly, totaling 26 paychecks per year instead of 12. This means they will be paid more frequently with shorter intervals between paychecks. The bi-weekly pay cycle operates on a 1-week lag. So rather than receiving payment on the last day of the pay period, employees will be paid a week after the pay period concludes. This additional week allows for accurate time entry, approvals, overtime calculations, and payroll processing. Additionally, employees should note that they will no longer need to submit a monthly leave reports because leave taken will be reported on their timesheets or in their logo time card.
Payroll transition dates. This chart lists important dates for you to be aware of in your transition from a monthly to biweekly pay cycle. You will see information on when to expect your last monthly paycheck and your first biweekly paycheck. As you can see here, your last monthly paycheck for pay period December 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024 will be paid out on Friday, December 20th, 2024. Your first biweekly paycheck for pay period January 1st, 2025 through January 10th, 2025 will be paid out on Friday, January 17th, 2025. Your second biweekly paycheck for pay period January 11th, 2025 through January 24th, 2025 will be paid out on Friday, January 31st, 2025. And your third biweekly paycheck for pay period January 2025, February 7th, 2025 will be paid out on Friday, February 14th, 2025. As we just went over on the previous slides, employees transitioning will receive 2 paychecks in the month of January. The first will be received on January 17th, and the second will be received on January 31st for the days worked January 1st through January 24th. January 25th through the 31st are included in the biweekly pay period that pays on February 14th. The 2 paychecks in January will account for fewer work days than the exempt monthly paycheck on January 31st would have. This change in timing results in employees receiving less pay in the month of January than they would be accustomed to receiving as an exempt employee.
I will now be sharing an option UNM will be implementing to help support impacted employees in the transition to bi-weekly pay cycles. To help with the financial transition to bi-weekly pay cycles, UNM is offering an optional bridge payment program to ease the financial impact of moving from a monthly real-time pay schedule to a bi-weekly pay cycle. This is a voluntary program, and all impacted employees who have sufficient leave balances are eligible to participate. This program will allow employees to convert up to 1 week of accrued annual or sick leave into earnings, which will be paid out on their January 31st, 2025 paycheck. This voluntary leave conversion opportunity offers impacted employees flexibility to choose how much of their accrued leave, if any, they would like to convert to earnings to assist with the transition to a bi-weekly pay cycle. Employees have the option to convert up to 40 hours of their accrued annual and/or sick leave. Any converted leave will be paid out on the January 31, 2025 paycheck and will be deducted from the employee's available leave balances. This voluntary opportunity allows employees to decide how much of their leave, if any, they wish to convert. Employees are encouraged to review their current leave balances as part of this decision-making process and make informed decisions as they plan their leave in the upcoming months, specifically as the holidays are approaching. A few key dates for the voluntary leave conversion opportunity are as follows. On December 13th, 2024, leave reporting and leave conversion election forms will become available. The deadline to submit December leave reports and leave conversion program opportunity request is January 8th, 2025. A confirmation email will be sent to employees and supervisors on December leave entries by January 10th, 2025. Finally, employees who elected to convert leave into earnings will see the converted amount deposited with their second biweekly paycheck on January 31st, 2025. Detailed instructions on how to participate in this program will be sent directly to eligible employees and are also available on the FLSA website
Preparing for biweekly transition for payroll. Employees should start preparing for the biweekly transition and review your pay stub, your W-4 additional deductions, and direct deposit on My UNM Global Web. If you currently have any additional amounts taken for federal or state tax withholding, consider making adjustments due to the shift in the pay frequency going from monthly pay cycles to biweekly pay cycles. Also, review your direct deposit and consider changes due to the shift in the pay frequency. For example, if you have a fixed amount of $500 going to a bank account, note that it will now be deposited on a biweekly pay schedule, meaning 2 or 3 times a month versus once a month. Be mindful of the time frame to submit any changes. All deduction changes must be made between Thursday, January 2nd, 2025, and Monday, January 13th, 2025, no later than 4 p.m. to be effective for your first biweekly paycheck. Again, it is critical that you submit any changes during that window to have those changes made for your first biweekly paycheck. Employees should also review their automatic payments from their bank accounts to determine if any adjustments are needed. Give yourself time to contact financial institution to discuss adjustments if needed. For those of you who participate in a voluntary retirement plan, review retirement at work for supplemental retirement deductions and adjust your amounts accordingly. Again, you can do this by logging into Retirement at Work to make those changes. For members of the Educational Retirement Board, ERB, this transition does not impact your ERB contributions. If you are currently eligible, ERB will automatically be deducted for each paycheck accordingly. Managing time and pay overtime. Overtime provisions at UNM. Employees in a non-exempt status can either earn comp time or be paid overtime within a week for hours worked over 40, which again is paid at 1.5 times the employee's regular rate. As a reminder, the work week is Saturday through Friday. To work more than 40 hours in the week, you must receive prior written approval from your supervisor. For example, if a non-exempt employee works 40.5 hours in a week and is earning comp time, they would be paid for 40 regular hours and accumulate 0.75 hours of comp time. If a non-exempt employee works 41 hours in a week and is earning overtime, they would be paid for 40 regular hours and paid 1.5 hours of additional pay. Overtime is paid immediately on the employee's following paycheck in the form of additional pay. Comp time is compensated as time off. If the time is not used within 90 days, comp time is paid out in the form of additional pay on the employee's paycheck. Please note that comp time does not automatically pay out and requires initiation from both the employee and supervisor to use that earned comp time. Managing time and pay for holidays. UNM holidays observed. All UNM observed holidays are counted as time worked. So if an employee works on a holiday, the worked hours will be paid at 1.5 times the employee's regular rate, which is time and a half, and will also be given time off in lieu of the holiday. Again, this is if the employee works on the holiday. For example, winter break counts as hours worked. For example, Wednesday, January 1st, 2025 is a UNM observed holiday and falls within winter break. Eligible employees will have the holiday hours entered in their time card for this day. For more information on holiday time, please reference Policy 3405 Holidays. Managing time and pay for leave accruals. Accruals for annual leave specifically. Biweekly accrues 6.47 hours per paycheck and monthly accrues 14 hours per paycheck. Both total 21 days, which is a total of 168 hours per year. Accruals for sick leave for a biweekly employee accrues 3.7 hours per paycheck and monthly accrues 8 hours per paycheck. Both total 12 days, which is 96 hours per year. Overtime and use of leave. If an employee takes leave, either annual or sick, during the week and their total hours worked exceed 40, the additional hours will not qualify as overtime and payment will be capped at 40 hours for that week. In relation to next steps in preparing for these changes, we have compiled a list of items that you want to take a look at and potentially take action on if it is applicable to you. Please log into MyUNM Lobo Web to determine if adjustments are needed on any of the following items. Review your current pay stub and deductions. If needed, analyze current timing of bill payments deducted from bank accounts such as mortgage payments. Review and update your direct deposit fixed amounts by January 13, 2025. Review and update your W-4 fixed amounts by January 13, 2025. Review and update supplemental annuities and any additional amount taken for federal and state tax withholdings. You will want to discuss timing, deadlines, and how to fill out biweekly timesheets accurately with your supervisor or manager. We also ask that you take advantage of utilizing the payroll calculator. The calculator provides general guidance and estimates for employees' typical payroll amounts, and you can find this on myunm.edu.
To review a timeline and next steps. There will be continued updates on the FLSA website, which will include up-to-date information, resources, and FAQs. During the months of November through December, there will be follow-up communications sent to HR agents, departmental HR liaisons, impacted employees, and their supervisors. Starting November 4th through December 17th, weekly virtual FLSA drop-in information sessions will be held on Tuesdays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. These virtual sessions will be hosted by an HR consultant, benefits specialist, and compensation specialist. This is a dedicated time for impacted employees, supervisors, and HR liaisons to ask questions and receive support related to the FLSA transition. UNM will be closed from December 23rd, 2024 to January 1st, 2025 for winter break. On January 1, 2025, FLSA changes will go into effect. During the week of January 2nd, 2025, formal notice of changes will be emailed to impacted employees. All updates to finalize the transition from exempt to non-exempt status for affected employees will be processed and completed in UNM's banner system. The FLSA webpage is a very useful resource. It serves as a point of centralized information, making it easier for employees and supervisors to understand and adapt to FLSA related changes. This website houses helpful information such as an implementation timeline, resources for impacted employees, including an overview of changes, what to expect transitioning to non-exempt status chart, and an employee checklist. There are also resources for impacted supervisors and departments, such as an overview of FLSA changes and manager responsibilities, as well as a supervisor checklist, which will be coming soon. Additionally, there are quick links for FAQs, recorded meetings and slides such as this town hall, information on the weekly drop-in sessions, and an FLSA communication archive. The FLSA website will be updated continuously ensuring that the university community stays informed about important program details and any new guidance that can help make the transition from exempt to non-exempt smoother. Additionally, I would like to invite you to review and become familiar with university administrative policies, procedures, and processes related to non-exempt employees. This includes employee classification, overtime, paid time, compensatory time, holidays, annual leave, sick leave, wage and salary administration, specifically Section 6 standby pay, as well as HR's standby pay procedures. Please also visit the Department of Labor Final Rule Restoring and Extending Overtime Protections website to better understand FLSA regulations and impacts. That concludes our presentation today. I would like to thank you all for your time and attention. If you have specific questions that were not answered today, please reach out to our FLSA email at flsa@unm.edu. At this time, I will turn it over to our moderator for additional questions and comments.
Thank you, Emily and Melanie, and thanks again, everybody, for joining. Had a handful of frequent questions coming in, and we'll address some of those. Many of the questions coming in specific to your individual position, individual department, individual salary or benefits. Just to remind you, those will be best answered individually by emailing our flsa@unm.edu email box. But I will run through and talk through some of the frequent questions we've seen coming in through the Q&A. And I'll start with an easy one first. And that's that we are going to post the presentation from this session and post the recording of the presentation to the FLSA website later today. Maybe next up, lots of questions in the Q&A as it relates to the legal challenges for this new federal rule. So as Melanie mentioned in the presentation, there are a handful of pending legal challenges. And for those of us who recall the last big FLSA change in 2016 that ultimately ended with a legal intervention and reversal, we are closely monitoring those pending legal challenges. The current outcome is uncertain. The timing of when the courts may act and make decisions is also uncertain. We're continuing to monitor that and doing our best to prepare as if the rule is going into effect on January 1st. However, as was mentioned during the presentation, in the event that the rule is paused, delayed, and joined, we'll be pausing this implementation in response to any of that legal intervention. Next, I want to move to lots of questions about sick and annual leave accruals, particularly as it relates to the move to biweekly and how many hours of sick and annual leave do folks accrue throughout the course of a year? And is there any change in that overall accrual between exempt and non-exempt? And so with this change, currently exempt employees earn or accrue 14 hours of annual leave and 8 hours of sick leave a year, which result, or a pay period, which results in 168 hours of annual leave and 96 hours of sick leave over the course of a year. With this shift to non-exempt, employees will accrue 6.47 hours of annual leave and 3.7 hours of sick leave per pay period. And over the course of the 26 pay periods throughout the year, non-exempt employees accrue that same 168 hours of annual leave and 96 hours of sick leave. So there's no change they're assuming full-time work in both cases. There's also lots of questions about remote work and how does this impact remote work. And so I'd encourage folks to review University Administrative Policy 3245, which governs our remote work process. And as it specifically relates to the change to non-exempt and this transition, for individuals working hybrid, so some on campus, some at home, or working in-state remote work, so fully remote, but within New Mexico, there's no practical change as it relates to the remote work requirements. Our policy does provide for a limitation on out-of-state remote work to only exempt employees. Because of this transition to non-exempt as a result of the Fair Labor Standard Act changes, HR will be working with impacted employees, and so these are out-of-state remote employees transitioning to non-exempt to facilitate policy exceptions and allow that remote work to continue. And so we do not expect any practical change to current employees' existing remote work agreements. Couple of questions about benefit deductions. And so I'm going to do two things here, answer broadly and then point folks to our website where there's much more specific information. Benefit deductions do change with the shift from monthly to biweekly. For the most part, if you're enrolled in medical benefits, your premium deductions will be automatically updated. Those premiums are deducted from two checks per month. And so the 2 months a year where we have 3 paychecks for non-exempt employees, you won't see those medical benefit deductions taken. And if you go to the FLSA website, we have a what to expect guide posted there on the homepage for employees that does a nice job comparing the side-by-side changes in benefits and withholdings, as well as clarifying what will happen automatically as a result of the change and where there are things that employees might need to adjust themselves. For example, participation in our voluntary retirement plans, our 403B or 457 plans, will need to be adjusted by employees if you want to change your contributions to those. And again, more information on that is available on the FLSA website. Next up, lots of questions coming in as it relates to part-time employees and particularly around employees whose annualized salary, if they were full-time at 1 FTE, is above the threshold in a grade 13 or higher. Why are they being changed to non-exempt? And so the FLSA doesn't distinguish between full-time and part-time employees, and it really sets that salary threshold. And so in order for employees to be considered exempt, even part-time employees in higher grades, they need to have a salary, a prorated salary for their FTE above the threshold. While it's probably unlikely that part-time non-exempt employees will exceed 40 hours a week and be paid overtime, they remain eligible for that overtime because of their salary threshold. Next, I want to shift to lots of questions around overtime specifically. And not surprisingly, one of the biggest impacts of this changes and really the government's rationale for it is to increase overtime protection and eligibility for employees. And so, lots of questions in the chat about, or in the Q&A, about the unexpected need to work more. I have to stay late to meet a deadline. I'm working with a patient on the phone, going through an issue with them, and I need to keep addressing that and can't simply hang up the phone and clock out because I've hit the end of my scheduled workday. And so while we've pointed out that overtime should be pre-approved by your supervisor, and you should work overtime and get that approved consistent with your department's processes and procedures, even if overtime wasn't pre-approved, UNM is required and we will pay overtime for those hours. In the event that work schedules fluctuate, non-exempt employees are still able to flex their time with the approval of their supervisor. And so if I have a pending deadline tomorrow and I'm going to stay 3 hours late tonight, I can work with my supervisor to flex time within the same week to account for that additional time in lieu of overtime. But if folks, if you need to work more than 40 hours a week, UNM is required to pay for that overtime. And in terms of advice to supervisors for how to manage this, how to support employees, really, really focus on what reasonable expectations are for a 40-hour work week, and make sure that what we're asking our employees to do fits within the work schedule that we've agreed upon. And so for employees, again, working unexpectedly overtime on occasion, is okay. That happens. It's the nature of the needs of our jobs, of our departments. But we do need to be mindful of that requirement for pre-approval from our supervisor and ensure that our normal practice as it relates to overtime is in line with our departmental procedures. Lots of questions as well as it relates to travel. And so what we'll do here is I'll point folks to our website and to university policy. So UAP 3300, section 10 has a very detailed chart that outlines the paid time for travel for non-exempt employees, and really goes through category by category as it relates to what type of travel time for non-exempt employees is considered paid time and what travel time for non-exempt employees is not considered paid time. Questions here also, a couple about how does this impact, how do different funding sources or different campuses relate to this change? Because this is UNM's compliance with a new federal regulation, this applies to our staff at all campuses. So that's at the central campus, at health sciences, at all of the branch campuses. And so everybody that we've discussed meeting the criteria today will transition from exempt to non-exempt status, as well as independent of the funding source associated with salaries. And so whether folks are working in an auxiliary unit, if they're funded by instruction in general, if they're grant funded, our compliance with the federal regulation needs to apply across funding sources. Couple of questions as well about comp time. And so comp time, when an employee works more than 40 hours a week, they have the option to elect comp time instead of overtime pay. Comp time is accrued at 1.5 hours per hour, similar to the way we pay overtime. And that can be used at a later date. And so I think the distinction in some of the questions we see coming in as it relates to comp time and flex time. Flex time is when you stay an hour late on a Monday and work through a schedule change with your supervisor to come in an hour late on a Wednesday within that same week. If I were, as it relates to comp time, if I work more than 40 hours a week and opt to take comp time, those are hours earned that I can use at a later date. And if those comp time hours go unused, they will eventually be paid out as overtime. And there are details in both our comp time and overtime policies that specify that in more detail. Another easy question came in, so I'll take a chance to answer that one. Lots of Q&As coming in. We're going to do our best to answer the frequent ones here live. Those questions that we don't get to, we will respond to directly, or we will incorporate into our frequently asked question page on the FLSA website. And so I would encourage everybody at the close of this session, and as we go through this transition over the next few months, to check out that FLSA website. There is a lot of helpful information, and and detail dates, tools, etc., that will help both employees and supervisors and their departments navigate this change. And I think those were some of the big questions. And so maybe the last theme of question coming in that I'll address, and this was something that Emily and Melanie went through early on in the presentation, but I do think bears repeating given the number of questions and given the size of the impact of this change. I'm going to start by saying we recognize the size of this impact. We recognize the disruption that a move from monthly exempt status to non-exempt employment and being paid biweekly causes. Our approach to really focus this change on moving positions that are in grades 11 and 12 to non-exempt is about ensuring that folks in positions that are performing similar duties within the same classification are treated consistently from a pay and overtime and exemption standpoint. And that's really important. It's problematic and independent of salary level. It's problematic to have a grade 12 accountant too, who's exempt from overtime sitting next to potentially a grade 12 accountant too, who's paid hourly and subject to overtime for working more than 40 hours a week. And so ensuring that consistency across job title and as a byproduct across grade really is important and foundational to successfully complying with this new rule. Lastly, it is, we've gone through a lot of information today that highlights the significance of the changes between being exempt and non-exempt, both from a time tracking and overtime and work scheduling standpoint, as well as it relates to the timing and cadence of our pay cycles. And given the magnitude of those changes and the disruption that they can cause, we want to minimize the shifts of exemption status back and forth. And because pay in an individual position and an individual's salary can change on a regular basis, be that annual increases or other changes to salary. We do think it would be really disruptive to employees and to their departments to have more frequent and regular changes back and forth of exemption status by looking only at salary. And so, the intent of focusing this on grades 11 and 12, where we can ensure that we have consistent application of our exemption status, of the Fair Labor Standards Act, of how we're compensating folks for overtime is really important. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and close today's presentation. I know we have a lot of specific questions still in the Q&A that we will get to offline and respond to or post to our FLSA website. Please be on the lookout for more information as it relates to these transitions, particularly the specific information relating to the pay cycle change that we discussed, and the opportunity to convert accrued leave in January to help with the transition of this pay cycle shift. Specific instructions and information on that opportunity will be sent out in the coming weeks, and so be on the lookout for those. If you have other questions specific to your department, your own position, your specific salary, benefit situation, etc., please email flsa@unm.edu, and we'll be sure to get back to you so we can discuss any specific questions. Lastly, beginning Tuesday, we will be hosting weekly drop-in question and answer sessions. And so you can go to the FLSA webpage for a schedule and Zoom link for those sessions, but that's another opportunity. If you have additional questions or want to discuss specific a specific situation or specific item, those are good opportunities. And that will be every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock for at least the duration of the semester. In closing, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Melanie and Emily, for the presentation. Our other panelists who were manning the Q&A, many, much appreciation for that. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have the slide deck and a recording of this presentation posted on the FLSA website later today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a safe and relaxing weekend. Bye-bye.